Before George Washington became the face of a new nation, there was John Adams, a brilliant lawyer, fearless revolutionary, and a man who helped turn ideas of freedom into a country. He defended unpopular causes, negotiated with powerful European nations, and faced political enemies both abroad and at home, all while shaping the very foundation of America. Welcome to my channel Words of Time, and explore the story of John Adams, the second president whose courage, principle, and vision changed history. In this video, we will explore John Adams's life in detail, from his early years in Massachusetts to his presidency and beyond. We will look at his achievements, his struggles, and the legacy he left for future generations. By the end, you will see why John Adams, though sometimes overshadowed by other founders, remains one of the most influential figures in American history. John Adams is one of the most important figures in American history, yet he often doesn't get the same recognition as George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. Despite this, Adams played a key role in shaping the nation, from its earliest debates about independence to the first years of the United States government. His life was full of achievements, challenges, and moments that shaped the course of history. To understand Adams is to understand the founding of the United States in a deeper, more personal way. Born in 1735 in Braintree, Massachusetts, Adams grew up in a world very different from the one we know today. Life in colonial New England was largely rural, and most people lived on farms or small towns. Adams's family was well respected in their community, but they were not wealthy. His father, a farmer and a shoemaker, valued hard work, education, and moral integrity, values that Adams would carry with him throughout his life. Early on, he showed a remarkable curiosity and determination, excelling in school and developing an interest in law and public service. Adams's story is not just about his personal achievements. It is also about the choices he made in a time of great uncertainty. The American colonies were under British rule, and tensions were growing over taxes, representation, and the rights of citizens. Many people were still loyal to the crown, while others were beginning to argue for independence. In this environment, Adams's legal training and sharp mind allowed him to see issues from multiple perspectives. He believed deeply in justice and fairness, and he was willing to defend unpopular positions if he thought they were right. One of the best examples of this was his defense of British soldiers after the Boston Massacre, a decision that earned him both respect and criticism. Adams was also a thinker and writer. He kept detailed notes, wrote essays, and engaged in debates with some of the most influential minds of his time. His writings reveal a careful, thoughtful approach to politics. He often considered the long-term consequences of decisions and tried to find solutions that balance liberty with order. These qualities would later guide his work in the Continental Congress, his diplomatic missions in Europe, and his time as vice president and president. In addition to his political achievements, Adams's personal life gives us insight into his character. His marriage to Abigail Adams was one of the great partnerships in American history. They exchanged hundreds of letters over decades, discussing politics, family matters, and philosophy. These letters show Adams not just as a public figure, but as a husband, father, and friend. Abigail's influence was crucial to his success, and their correspondence remains one of the most important sources for understanding the founding era. Adams's life also highlights the challenges of leadership. He often faced opposition, both from political rivals and from the public. His decisions were not always popular, and he sometimes clashed with other leaders, including Thomas Jefferson. Yet he consistently acted according to his principles, even when it meant personal or political cost. His ability to navigate these difficulties, while still leaving a lasting impact on the nation, sets him apart as a figure of remarkable courage and integrity. Understanding John Adams means understanding the complexity of the American Revolution and the early Republic. He was a man who valued reason over popularity, duty over self-interest, and principle over convenience. His contributions to the legal foundations of the United States, his work in securing independence, and his efforts to establish a stable government make him a figure worthy of study. For a modern audience, his story offers lessons about leadership, responsibility, and the power of ideas to shape history. John Adams was born on October 30th, 1735, in the small town of Braintree, Massachusetts, which today is part of Quincy. His childhood gives us a window into colonial life and the influences that shaped one of America's most important founding fathers. Understanding Adams's early years helps explain his values, his drive, and the sense of duty that guided him throughout his life. Adams came from a modest, hard-working family. His father, John Adams Sr., was a farmer and shoemaker, known in the community for his strong work ethic and deep moral convictions. His mother, Susanna Boylston Adams, came from a more prosperous background, and she valued education and learning. This combination of practical skills and intellectual curiosity created a nurturing environment for young John. From a very early age, he was exposed to the values of responsibility, honesty, and commitment to community, principles that he would carry into his adult life. Education was highly valued in the Adams family. In a time when many children worked on farms rather than attending school, John Adams was fortunate to have access to formal education. He began his studies at a local grammar school and quickly showed a remarkable aptitude for reading, writing, and arithmetic. His teachers noticed his natural intelligence and his ability to think critically. Beyond academics, he displayed a curiosity about the world and a love for learning that would stay with him his entire life. Adams's childhood was not without challenges. Life in colonial Massachusetts was often harsh. Harsh winters, demanding farm work, and the expectations of a tightly knit Puritan community shaped his early years. The Puritan influence was particularly strong. It emphasized discipline, moral responsibility, and a sense of duty to both God and community. These values were deeply ingrained in Adams and would later influence his approach to public service and governance. In 1751, at the age of 16, Adams entered Harvard College, one of the few institutions in the colonies that offered higher education. Harvard was rigorous, with a curriculum focused on classical studies, rhetoric, philosophy, and theology. Adams thrived in this environment. He immersed himself in reading, writing, and debate, showing both intellectual skill and a strong personal discipline. Harvard also exposed him to a broader world of ideas. He encountered the writings of European philosophers, especially those of the Enlightenment, which emphasized reason, individual rights, and the importance of civic virtue. These ideas would profoundly shape his political thinking later in life. While at Harvard, Adams also developed a sense of independence and self-reliance. He was not a wealthy student, and he often had to work to support himself. He tutored other students and engaged in small tasks to pay for his expenses. This experience taught him the value of hard work and reinforced his belief that education was not just a privilege, but a responsibility. After graduating from Harvard in 1755, Adams began studying law under James Putnam, a respected local attorney. This apprenticeship provided practical experience in the legal system and helped Adams develop skills in argumentation, reasoning, and negotiation. Law appealed to him not just as a profession, but as a way to serve society. He saw it as a tool for justice and as a way to protect the rights of individuals. His training prepared him for the political challenges he would face later, giving him the confidence and knowledge to speak effectively in public and to argue complex ideas clearly. Adams's early career as a lawyer also helped him form important relationships and networks. He began taking cases in nearby towns, earning a reputation for honesty, intelligence, and fairness. People respected him not only for his skill, but also for his integrity. These qualities would later make him a trusted voice in debates about colonial rights and independence. Beyond academics and law, Adams's family life and personal experiences helped shape his character. He grew up in a household where discussion, debate, and reflection were common. He learned to express his opinions clearly and to defend them thoughtfully. He also witnessed the challenges of family life, balancing work, community obligations, and personal responsibilities, which gave him practical wisdom that would inform his political judgment. Adams's early environment also exposed him to the social and political tensions of the colonies. In the 1740s and 1750s, Massachusetts was already feeling the pressures of British rule, including taxes, trade restrictions, and disputes over governance. Young Adams would have been aware of these tensions, both through conversations at home and through his education. These early experiences gave him a sense of the broader world beyond his town and laid the groundwork for his later involvement in the fight for American independence. In 1758, Adams married Abigail Smith, a woman whose intellect, wit, and moral strength match his own. Abigail came from a well-educated family, and the partnership they formed was deeply influential in shaping Adams's thinking and career. Their correspondence over the years provides a unique window into Adams's life, revealing his thoughts on politics, philosophy, and personal matters. Abigail's influence helped him refine his ideas and strengthened his resolve during the difficult years ahead. By the time he began his political career, Adams had already developed the qualities that would define him: a strong sense of duty, a commitment to justice, intellectual curiosity, and the ability to reason through complex issues. His early life, shaped by family, education, and the social environment of colonial Massachusetts, provided the foundation for a remarkable career that would span law, politics, diplomacy, and the presidency. John Adams's upbringing shows us how a combination of personal character, family influence, and social environment can shape a leader. From his early exposure to education and civic responsibility to his legal training and marriage, Adams was prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. His story reminds us that the foundations of leadership are often built quietly in the daily habits, values, and experiences of early life. John Adams did not become a revolutionary overnight. His journey from a thoughtful lawyer in Massachusetts to a leading voice for American independence was gradual, shaped by education, experience, and the growing political tension in the colonies. To understand Adams's revolutionary mind, we need to look at the ideas, events, and personal principles that influenced him during this critical period. After completing his legal studies and establishing his career, Adams became deeply involved in the civic life of Massachusetts. His work as a lawyer exposed him to cases that were often more than legal disputes. They touched on fundamental issues of justice, authority, and the rights of individuals. Adams was particularly concerned with fairness under the law. He believed that everyone, regardless of social standing, deserved a fair trial. This commitment to justice was more than professional. It reflected his broader political philosophy. Adams's early experiences defending clients in tense, politically charged situations taught him to see beyond personal gain and to consider the larger implications of decisions for the community and the colonies. The mid-1760s were a turning point for Adams and for the American colonies. Britain, struggling to pay off the debts of the 7 Years' War, began to impose new taxes on the colonies. The Stamp Act of 1765, which required colonists to pay for a government-issued stamp on legal documents, newspapers, and other items, was particularly controversial. Adams saw these taxes not just as financial burdens, but as a challenge to the principle of self-government. He argued that laws and taxes imposed without representation violated the natural rights of the colonists. This was a key moment in the formation of his revolutionary thinking. Adams began to see the struggle for justice in legal terms, and he recognized the moral responsibility to challenge what he saw as unjust authority. Adams's ideas were also influenced by his reading and engagement with contemporary thought. He was well-versed in the writings of Enlightenment philosophers such as John Locke, Montesquieu, and Rousseau. These thinkers emphasized the importance of reason, individual rights, and the social contract, the idea that governments exist to serve the people. Adams took these ideas seriously, blending them with his practical understanding of law and governance. He believed that a legitimate government must protect the rights of its citizens, and he began to envision a political system in which power was balanced and accountable. These philosophical foundations would guide his later work in drafting legal frameworks and shaping the new nation. At the same time, Adams was observing the political unrest around him. Groups like the Sons of Liberty were organizing protests, boycotts, and acts of civil disobedience in response to British policies. Adams admired their passion, but often emphasized the importance of careful, principled action. He believed that resistance should be rooted in law, reason, and moral authority, rather than violence or mob rule. This distinction set him apart from some other revolutionary figures. He was committed to independence, but he also valued order, fairness, and the rule of law. One of the defining moments of Adams's revolutionary development was his decision to defend the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre in 1770. While many colonists called for immediate punishment, Adams insisted on providing a fair trial. He argued that justice required every person to be treated according to the law, regardless of public opinion. This decision demonstrated his courage, integrity, and commitment to principle, qualities that would define his revolutionary leadership. The trial also reinforced his belief in the importance of legal and moral reasoning as a foundation for political action. Adams's involvement in public affairs increased during the 1770s. He began writing essays, giving speeches, and corresponding with other colonial leaders about the growing crisis with Britain. These writings reveal a thinker who was both strategic and idealistic. He carefully considered the potential consequences of actions and decisions, weighing the benefits and risks of rebellion. At the same time, he was driven by a sense of justice and duty. He believed that freedom was not a matter of convenience, but a moral obligation. Another key influence on Adams was his network of political allies and mentors. He developed strong working relationships with other leaders in Massachusetts, including Samuel Adams, James Otis, and John Hancock. These interactions exposed him to different perspectives and helped him refine his arguments. He learned the importance of compromise, persuasion, and coalition building, skills that would prove essential in the Continental Congress and later diplomatic missions. At the same time, he maintained an independent voice, willing to challenge ideas or strategies he believed were flawed. Adams's revolutionary thinking was also shaped by his observations of British governance. He studied the structure and function of the British Parliament, the monarchy, and the colonial administration. He admired aspects of the British legal system, but was critical of its abuses. He recognized that power concentrated in the hands of a few could lead to corruption and oppression. These insights strengthened his belief that any new American government needed checks and balances, as well as a commitment to protecting individual rights. During this period, Adams also began to articulate his vision for the future of America. He wrote extensively on the need for representative government, separation of powers, and civic virtue. He emphasized that citizens had responsibilities as well as rights, and that public service required moral integrity. These ideas were not abstract. They reflected his practical experience as a lawyer, civic leader, and observer of political conflict. He believed that successful self-government depended on the character of both leaders and citizens. By the mid-1770s, Adams had fully emerged as a revolutionary thinker. He was not simply reacting to events. He was shaping them. He argued for independence, contributed to the debates about colonial rights, and prepared himself for the political challenges ahead. His revolutionary mind combined legal reasoning, moral philosophy, and practical politics. He understood that winning independence would require not only courage, but also careful planning, negotiation, and leadership. In many ways, Adams's revolutionary development was a combination of internal and external influences. His upbringing instilled discipline, moral responsibility, and a commitment to education. His legal career taught him to think critically and argue effectively. His reading and engagement with Enlightenment philosophy gave him a framework for understanding rights and governance. And the political crises of the 1760s and 1770s provided the context in which these qualities could be tested and refined. By the time he joined the Continental Congress in 1774, Adams was prepared to take on a central role in the American struggle for independence. He had developed a clear vision of government, a deep commitment to justice, and the courage to act on principle. The making of John Adams as a revolutionary mind was not a single event, but a process, a combination of experience, reflection, and moral conviction. This foundation would guide his actions in Congress, his work on the Declaration of Independence, and his later diplomatic and presidential achievements. John Adams's journey to becoming a revolutionary thinker reminds us that leadership is often the result of years of preparation, study, and principled action. His life demonstrates how ideas, character, and experience can come together to shape a person capable of influencing the course of history. For those seeking to understand the origins of the American Revolution, Adams's story provides a powerful example of how one individual's mind and moral compass can make a lasting difference. By the early 1770s, John Adams had already established himself as a respected lawyer and a thoughtful political mind. His experiences in law, combined with the political ideas he had been developing, positioned him to face one of the most defining moments of his early career, the Boston Massacre trials of 1770. These trials would test his commitment to justice, his courage, and his reputation among his fellow colonists. Tensions in Boston had been building for years. British soldiers had been stationed in the city to enforce unpopular laws and taxes, and the colonists increasingly viewed them as symbols of oppression. On March 5, 1770, a confrontation escalated into violence when a group of colonists clashed with soldiers outside the customs house. Shots were fired, and 5 civilians were killed. The incident, quickly labeled the Boston Massacre, inflamed public opinion. Many colonists demanded immediate punishment for the soldiers, and anger against the British authority reached a fever pitch. Into this volatile environment stepped John Adams. Despite the widespread hostility toward the soldiers, Adams agreed to defend them in court. This decision was not easy. He knew that defending the British could damage his reputation and even put him at personal risk. But Adams was guided by principle. He believed that everyone deserved a fair trial, regardless of public opinion. For Adams, justice was not something to be swayed by the crowd, and he saw the trial as an opportunity to uphold the rule of law in the colonies. Adams's defense strategy was careful, reasoned, and grounded in legal expertise. He argued that the soldiers had acted in self-defense, under confusing and dangerous circumstances. He emphasized the importance of evidence and witness testimony, carefully dissecting the events of that night. Adams's approach was meticulous. He did not rely on emotion or public sentiment, but instead focused on the facts and legal principles. The trial was also a test of Adams's rhetorical skills. In front of a highly charged courtroom, he needed to convince the jury to look beyond anger and outrage and consider the case objectively. He appealed to reason and morality, reminding both the jury and the public that justice required fair treatment for all, including those perceived as enemies. His arguments were clear, persuasive, and principled, showing the combination of intellect and moral courage that had been developing since his early years in Braintree and Harvard. Public reaction to Adams's decision was mixed. Some colonists admired his courage and integrity, while others criticized him for defending the soldiers who had killed fellow citizens. Letters, newspapers, and pamphlets debated his motives. Despite the controversy, Adams remained steadfast. He believed that the long-term value of justice and rule of law outweighed short-term popularity. This willingness to act according to principle, even when unpopular, would characterize his later political career, including his presidency. The outcome of the trials reflected Adams's skill as a lawyer. Most of the soldiers were acquitted, while 2 were convicted of lesser charges. Adams's defense was widely respected among legal professionals, and his reputation for fairness grew. More importantly, the trials reinforced his belief that justice should be rooted in law and evidence, not in mob sentiment or political expedience. This lesson would guide him through the Revolutionary era and into his work in the Continental Congress. The Boston Massacre trials also deepened Adams's understanding of the growing conflict between the colonies and Britain. He saw firsthand how public outrage could be manipulated, how political tensions could escalate quickly, and how important it was to maintain moral clarity in the midst of chaos. These insights shaped his approach to leadership. He began to recognize that the fight for independence was not just about military action or political rhetoric. It was also about establishing a framework of justice, reason, and civic responsibility that would guide the new nation. It is important to connect the trials to Adams's revolutionary thinking. His legal defense of the soldiers did not contradict his commitment to independence. Instead, it demonstrated that he could balance principle with patriotism. Adams's actions showed that revolutionary leaders could be both strong advocates for liberty and defenders of justice. This balance became a hallmark of his political philosophy, influencing his later work in the Continental Congress, his diplomatic missions in Europe, and his approach to governance as vice president and president. The trials also reinforced the importance of personal courage and integrity in shaping public life. Adams knew that defending unpopular clients could cost him support and provoke criticism, yet he acted according to his conscience. This episode foreshadowed the difficult decisions he would face during the push for independence, where political risks were even higher and the stakes even greater. The Boston Massacre trials represent a critical moment in Adams's life. They marked the transition from a skilled lawyer and thoughtful observer of politics to a figure willing to take decisive action in defense of principle. The trials tested his legal expertise, his moral courage, and his ability to navigate a deeply divided public. They also laid the groundwork for his leadership during the Revolutionary era, teaching him lessons about justice, public opinion, and the responsibilities of those who would lead a nation. By defending the British soldiers, John Adams showed that his revolutionary mind was guided not by anger or passion alone, but by a deep sense of justice, reason, and duty. These qualities, nurtured during his early life and legal career, now found expression in concrete action, reinforcing the foundation for the role he would soon play in the Continental Congress and the fight for American independence. The Boston Massacre trials had solidified John Adams's reputation as a man of principle and courage. By the early 1770s, he was no longer just a respected lawyer. He was becoming a leading voice in the growing movement for American independence. The shift from observer and legal advocate to active political leader was gradual, but by 1774, Adams was ready to take on responsibilities that would shape the future of the colonies and, ultimately, the United States. Adams's entry into the Continental Congress came at a critical moment. The colonies were reacting to Britain's increasingly restrictive policies, including the Coercive Acts, which were designed to punish Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party. These laws had angered colonists across the 13 colonies, fueling a sense of shared grievance and urgency. When Adams was selected as a delegate to the First Continental Congress in 1774, he joined a gathering of the most prominent political minds in America. These men were tasked with addressing the escalating tensions with Britain and defining a collective response. In Congress, Adams quickly distinguished himself. His reputation for clear thinking, principled judgment, and persuasive argumentation made him a respected figure among his peers. Adams believed that the colonies needed a united front, but he also understood the complexity of achieving consensus. Each colony had its own interests, concerns, and priorities, and Adams's skill as a negotiator was essential in bridging differences. His legal training and earlier experiences in heated debates gave him the tools to articulate positions clearly, respond to objections thoughtfully, and persuade others without resorting to anger or intimidation. One of Adams's central contributions during this period was his advocacy for independence. While not all delegates were ready to break from Britain, Adams argued that the colonies had a moral and legal right to self-governance. He drew on Enlightenment philosophy, particularly the ideas of natural rights and social contracts, to justify the colonies' claim to freedom. Adams believed that governments existed to serve the people, and when a government violated those rights, citizens had both the right and the responsibility to resist. These arguments laid the groundwork for the Declaration of Independence, which Adams would help shape and support in the years that followed. Adams's work in Congress also involved practical planning for the defense and governance of the colonies. He served on important committees, analyzing issues such as military preparedness, finance, and trade. He understood that independence required more than just rhetoric. It required careful preparation, organization, and negotiation. For Adams, principle and practicality were inseparable. He combined his vision of liberty with concrete strategies to ensure the colonies could survive and thrive once free from British rule. While Adams was advocating for independence, he also had to navigate political rivalries and alliances. Relationships with other key figures, including Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and Samuel Adams, were complex. He admired the intellectual brilliance of Jefferson, but sometimes disagreed on strategy and timing. He respected Franklin's diplomatic skills, but had to assert his own vision in committee deliberations. Through these interactions, Adams learned the importance of both collaboration and standing firm on principle, a balance that would define his political career. Adams's role in shaping the Declaration of Independence is particularly significant. Though Jefferson is often credited as the principal author, Adams's influence is clear in the debates, drafting process, and philosophical framing of the document. He advocated for language that emphasized the natural rights of individuals and the colony's right to self-government. He was meticulous about the wording, understanding that precise language could carry moral and legal weight. Adams also encouraged a pragmatic approach. While ideals were important, the new nation needed a framework that could work in practice, balancing aspiration with governance. Supporting George Washington as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army was another area where Adams's leadership was evident. He recognized the importance of a strong, capable military leader to unite the colonies and defend their cause. His support for Washington reflected both strategic insight and a sense of duty. Adams knew that independence could only be achieved through coordinated effort and disciplined leadership. During this period, Adams also wrote extensively, both privately and publicly. His letters, essays, and political papers reveal a thinker constantly weighing principles against practical realities. He debated the merits of independence, considered the challenges of creating a new government, and reflected on the moral responsibilities of citizens and leaders. These writings not only guided his own actions, but also influenced other delegates and colonial leaders. They show a man who combined intellectual rigor with a deep sense of responsibility, a hallmark of Adams's revolutionary mind. Adams's vision of independence was rooted in a belief in civic virtue. He argued that freedom required citizens who were educated, informed, and morally responsible. Independence was not just a political goal, it was a moral project. Adams believed that the success of the new nation depended on the character of its people and leaders. This perspective influenced his later work on governance, including his advocacy for checks and balances, separation of powers, and the protection of individual rights. The road to independence was not without personal challenges for Adams. Political tensions, public scrutiny, and the constant pressure of making life-or-death decisions weighed heavily. He faced criticism from those who favored more immediate or more cautious approaches to resistance. Yet Adams consistently acted according to principle, guided by both reason and moral conviction. His ability to balance political pragmatism with ethical clarity became one of his defining traits as a leader. By the time the Second Continental Congress convened in 1775, Adams had fully emerged as a central figure in the movement for independence. He worked tirelessly on committees, influenced debates, and prepared the colonies for the difficult task ahead. His contributions were critical in setting the stage for the Declaration of Independence and in ensuring that the colonies were ready to act decisively when the moment came. Adams's leadership during this period also reflected continuity with his earlier experiences. The lessons he learned as a young lawyer, defending unpopular clients, as a thoughtful observer of British rule, and as a principled advocate for justice were all applied on a much larger stage. The skills and values that had guided him in Braintree and in the Boston courtroom now shaped the destiny of an entire nation. The road to independence was as much about preparation, principle, and persuasion as it was about rebellion. John Adams exemplified these qualities, combining intellect, courage, and moral responsibility. His work in Congress helped unite the colonies, shaped the philosophical foundations of independence, and prepared the new nation for the challenges ahead. The transition from a lawyer defending justice in the courtroom to a leader advocating for liberty on a continental scale shows how Adams's revolutionary mind had matured, blending principle with practical strategy in ways that would leave a lasting legacy. After establishing himself as a key leader in the push for independence, John Adams faced a new set of challenges, this time on the international stage. The fight for American independence was not only a domestic struggle, it also required foreign recognition, support, and financial backing. Adams's legal mind, experience in negotiation, and principled approach made him uniquely suited for this task. His diplomatic work in Europe would play a crucial role in securing the survival and legitimacy of the new United States. Adams's first major diplomatic assignment was in France. In 1777, the Continental Congress sent him to Paris, a city brimming with political intrigue and revolutionary ideas of its own. France had a long-standing rivalry with Britain and was seen as a potential ally, but negotiating with a foreign power required careful strategy. Adams understood that the American cause depended not just on the colony's ability to fight, but also on convincing European powers that independence was achievable, legitimate, and worthy of support. Arriving in Europe, Adams quickly recognized the challenges ahead. The political culture in France was vastly different from that of the colonies. Diplomacy required patience, tact, and an understanding of social hierarchy. Adams's blunt and principled style sometimes clashed with French etiquette, but he also brought clarity, honesty, and determination, qualities that earned respect over time. He insisted on presenting the American case based on justice, reason, and practical necessity rather than flattery or charm alone. While in France, Adams worked closely with Benjamin Franklin, who was already serving as the senior diplomat. Franklin's charm and popularity complemented Adams's more rigorous, structured approach. Together, they formed a team capable of both persuasion and negotiation. Adams often handled the more complex legal and financial aspects of diplomacy, including the details of trade agreements and loans. His meticulous approach ensured that American interests were clearly represented and protected. One of Adams's most significant achievements during this period was securing support from the Dutch Republic. The Netherlands had a long history of trade with the colonies and a tradition of republican government that resonated with American ideals. Adams's work in the Netherlands involved negotiating loans to fund the Revolutionary War and establishing formal recognition of American independence. These efforts were critical, as the colonies depended on both financial and political support to sustain the fight against Britain. Adams's skill in managing these negotiations demonstrated his combination of intellect, practicality, and moral clarity. Adams also played a key role in negotiating the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which formally ended the Revolutionary War. Alongside Benjamin Franklin and John Jay, Adams worked tirelessly to secure favorable terms for the United States. The treaty recognized American independence, established borders, and addressed issues such as debt repayment and trade rights. Adams's legal expertise and attention to detail were invaluable, ensuring that the treaty protected American interests and created a foundation for the new nation's future. Diplomacy in Europe was not without personal challenges. Adams faced long periods away from home, cultural differences, and frequent misunderstandings. His letters from this time reveal a man deeply committed to his mission, yet often frustrated by the slow pace of negotiations and the complexities of European politics. He had to navigate competing interests, personal rivalries among diplomats, and the delicate balance of power in Europe. Despite these obstacles, Adams remained steadfast, focused on the long-term goal of securing American independence and stability. While his work abroad was primarily political and financial, Adams also gained insights into governance and society in other nations. Observing France, the Netherlands, and Britain, he noted both the strengths and weaknesses of different political systems. He saw the dangers of concentrated power and the importance of civic virtue in sustaining a republic. These observations would later influence his views on American government and his writings on the balance of power and the responsibilities of citizens and leaders. Adams's time in Europe also tested his relationships with other American leaders. Negotiating with Franklin and Jay required diplomacy within the American delegation itself. Adams was principled and often blunt, sometimes causing tension, but his dedication to the mission earned him respect. He understood that unity among American representatives was essential to persuading European powers and achieving recognition for the fledgling nation. The success of Adams's diplomatic efforts had far-reaching consequences. By securing loans, alliances, and formal recognition, he helped ensure that the Revolutionary War could continue and that the United States would emerge as a legitimate, independent nation. His work also set a precedent for American diplomacy, emphasizing honesty, careful negotiation, and the importance of balancing ideals with practical considerations. Adams's experiences in Europe reinforced his belief in the need for a strong, balanced government. He saw firsthand how weak or poorly organized governments could be exploited, and he became convinced that the new United States needed clear structures, checks on power, and leaders of integrity. His observations abroad strengthened his commitment to principles that would later shape his advocacy for the Constitution and his approach as president. In addition to political and financial matters, Adams cultivated a deeper understanding of international relations. He realized that America's independence was only meaningful if it was respected globally. Recognition by European powers was essential not only for trade and security, but also for legitimacy. Adams's foresight in this regard demonstrates his strategic vision. He understood that the success of the revolution depended as much on diplomacy as on military victories. Adams's correspondence from this period also reveals a personal side. He wrote frequently to Abigail, sharing his thoughts, frustrations, and reflections on the world. These letters are filled with insights into his character, a man of principle, deeply committed to his country, and attentive to the well-being of his family. They also highlight the partnership with Abigail, whose counsel and support were crucial in sustaining him through the challenges of diplomacy. By the time Adams returned to the United States, he had transformed from a domestic leader into an international statesman. His diplomatic work in Europe ensured the survival of the American cause, strengthened the legitimacy of the new nation, and laid the groundwork for future international relations. The skills he developed, negotiation, patience, strategic thinking, and principled decision-making, would continue to shape his career, including his roles as vice president and president. John Adams's diplomatic work in Europe demonstrates the breadth and depth of his contributions to the American Revolution. He was not only a revolutionary thinker and a skilled lawyer. He was also a shrewd diplomat, capable of navigating complex political landscapes, securing crucial support, and ensuring the survival of a fledgling nation. His time abroad reflects the continuity of his character, principled, intelligent, and committed to the greater good. Through his work in France, the Netherlands, and in negotiating the Treaty of Paris, Adams secured the international recognition and resources that made independence viable. This period also shaped his understanding of governance, international relations, and the responsibilities of leadership. By the time he returned home, Adams was fully prepared to take on the next challenge, serving as the first vice president and, eventually, president of the United States. His European diplomacy stands as a testament to his intellect, dedication, and the practical application of the revolutionary principles he had long championed. After years of diplomatic service in Europe, John Adams returned to the United States in 1788, just as the new federal government under the Constitution was taking shape. The nation was transitioning from revolutionary struggle to self-governance, and Adams's reputation as a principled leader and experienced diplomat made him an ideal candidate for high office. In 1789, he became the first vice president of the United States under President George Washington. This role, while historically considered secondary, provided Adams with a unique platform to shape the early government and prepare for his future presidency. The vice presidency at the time was a largely undefined office. The Constitution gave Adams the position as the second highest executive officer, but its duties were limited. He would preside over the Senate and cast a vote in the case of a tie. Many contemporaries saw the role as ceremonial or marginal, but Adams approached it with the same seriousness and integrity that had characterized his career. He believed that every office carried responsibilities and that public service demanded diligence, regardless of title or visibility. In the Senate, Adams quickly established a reputation for fairness, knowledge, and respect for procedure. Presiding over debates required patience and impartiality, skills he had honed as a lawyer and diplomat. Adams understood that the new government needed order and precedent, and he worked to ensure that Senate proceedings were conducted with decorum. He recognized that the success of the federal system depended not just on written law, but on the norms, practices, and integrity of those in office. Adams's time as vice president also highlighted the challenges of balancing political loyalty with personal principle. While he was aligned with the Federalist vision of a strong central government, he was not blindly partisan. He often disagreed with colleagues when he believed their proposals were unjust or impractical. This independence earned him both respect and criticism as he navigated the delicate political terrain of a young nation still defining its institutions and priorities. One of the defining features of Adams's vice presidency was his careful observation of presidential leadership. Serving under George Washington allowed Adams to study executive decision-making at close range. He noted the importance of public perception, the need for careful communication, and the value of balancing competing interests. These lessons would later inform his own presidency, as he learned when to assert authority and when to exercise restraint. Adams also used the vice presidency to advocate for issues he believed were crucial to the young republic. He was particularly attentive to foreign policy, drawing on his European experience to advise on treaties, trade, and diplomatic strategy. He understood that America's security and prosperity depended on careful engagement with other nations, and he sought to influence policy in ways that balanced principle with practical necessity. Despite its limited formal power, the vice presidency was an important stage in Adams's political development. It allowed him to strengthen his understanding of federal government operations, to build relationships with key legislators, and to refine his vision for the presidency. His approach reflected continuity with his earlier career. Careful planning, attention to detail, and a commitment to principle guided every decision. Adams's vice presidency was not without tension. The role placed him between competing factions, and he sometimes struggled to assert influence in a political environment dominated by stronger personalities. Yet he maintained a steady commitment to integrity and service, demonstrating that leadership is often as much about character and reliability as it is about formal authority. John Adams's vice presidency laid the groundwork for his later leadership as president. It provided him with invaluable insight into the workings of the federal government, allowed him to apply his diplomatic and legal experience to domestic governance, and reinforced his lifelong commitment to principle over popularity. Though often underestimated, the office of vice president became, in Adams's hands, a proving ground for statesmanship, judgment, and dedication to the republic. Through his service, Adams demonstrated that leadership is defined not just by power or title, but by the integrity, effort, and foresight one brings to every responsibility. His vice presidency, connecting his revolutionary experience, diplomatic skill, and commitment to justice, was a crucial bridge to the presidency and a continuation of his lifelong dedication to public service. John Adams assumed the presidency in 1797, becoming the second president of the United States after George Washington. By this time, he had already spent decades in public service, from defending the principles of justice in Boston to negotiating treaties in Europe and serving as vice president. His presidency would test his abilities in ways no other office had, confronting him with domestic political divisions, foreign threats, and the challenge of establishing the role of the executive in a young and evolving republic. Adams's path to the presidency reflected both his accomplishments and his reputation for integrity. He was a Federalist, advocating for a strong national government, support for law and order, and careful management of foreign relations. His election followed the precedent set by Washington. Though less charismatic than his predecessor, Adams's reputation for principle, intelligence, and steadfastness won in the trust of the electorate and the political establishment. One of the most pressing challenges Adams faced as president was managing domestic political divisions. The United States was emerging from revolutionary unity into a period of partisan tension. Federalists, including Adams, supported a strong central government and close ties with Britain, while Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson, favored states' rights and closer relations with France. Adams recognized the dangers of deepening partisan conflict and sought to govern with a sense of balance, promoting stability and national interest above factional loyalty. Foreign policy was another central focus of Adams's presidency. The young nation faced ongoing tension with France, which was engaged in revolutionary wars across Europe. American neutrality was threatened by French interference with American shipping and attempts to draw the United States into the conflict. Adams's European experience proved invaluable in navigating these challenges. He understood the importance of diplomacy, negotiation, and the careful exercise of national authority to protect the country's interests without provoking unnecessary war. One of the defining events of Adams's presidency was the XYZ affair, in which French diplomats demanded bribes to begin negotiations with American representatives. The incident inflamed public opinion and raised calls for war. Adams faced a difficult choice: respond aggressively to protect national honor or pursue diplomacy to avoid a potentially disastrous conflict. Guided by principle and foresight, he chose the latter, strengthening the Navy and preparing defenses while seeking a peaceful resolution. His decision demonstrated political courage, restraint, and a commitment to the long-term stability of the nation. Adams's approach to the French crisis culminated in the Convention of 1800, which ended the undeclared naval conflict known as the Quasi-War. By negotiating a peaceful settlement, Adams avoided a full-scale war, secured favorable terms, and preserved the fledgling nation's resources. This outcome reflected his diplomatic skill and willingness to prioritize national interest over personal or political gain. Though his decision was unpopular with some Federalists who favored war, history has judged it as a defining moment of prudence and leadership. The domestic arena also presented challenges during Adams's presidency. One significant issue was the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798, a series of laws aimed at strengthening national security but criticized for infringing on civil liberties. Adams faced criticism for allowing the legislation to pass, though he attempted to balance enforcement with legal restraint. These acts created lasting controversy and highlighted the tension between security and liberty, a challenge Adams had confronted repeatedly in his career, from defending British soldiers in Boston to negotiating peace in Europe. Adams's presidency also emphasized the importance of precedent and institutional development. As the second president, he was setting examples for future office holders. He reinforced the authority of the executive branch, clarified procedures for managing foreign relations, and demonstrated the importance of principled decision-making, even when politically costly. He understood that his actions would shape the perception and effectiveness of the presidency for generations to come. Throughout his tenure, Adams remained committed to civic virtue and moral responsibility. He believed that a republic depended not only on strong institutions, but also on the character of its leaders and citizens. He worked to maintain public trust, prioritize the nation's interests over personal ambition, and navigate the often turbulent political landscape with integrity. This dedication reflected a lifelong pattern, connecting his early education, legal practice, revolutionary advocacy, and diplomatic work into a coherent philosophy of public service. Adams's relationship with Thomas Jefferson, his former ally turned political rival, also shaped his presidency. Though their differences were sharp, Adams recognized the importance of dialogue and compromise in governance. The challenges of governing a diverse and divided nation required him to balance principle with pragmatism, a skill he had refined over decades of public service. Economically, Adams focused on maintaining stability and strengthening national infrastructure. He supported the development of commerce, regulated currency, and encouraged policies that would secure the nation's financial independence. His understanding of international trade, honed during his diplomatic missions, informed these decisions, helping to integrate domestic policy with foreign relations and economic strategy. Adams also emphasized the rule of law and judicial independence. He strengthened the federal judiciary through appointments that reflected both competence and integrity, ensuring that courts could function effectively and impartially. His commitment to law and justice had been a constant throughout his career, from defending unpopular clients to drafting legislation and negotiating treaties. In the presidency, these principles guided his approach to governance and institutional development. Despite his many accomplishments, Adams faced criticism and political opposition, particularly in his bid for re-election in 1800. Partisan attacks, disagreements over policy, and public dissatisfaction with aspects of his administration contributed to a challenging campaign. Ultimately, he lost the presidency to Thomas Jefferson. Yet Adams's decision to accept the results peacefully, without resorting to violence or subversion, reinforced the principle of constitutional governance and set a vital precedent for the peaceful transfer of power. Adams's presidency, therefore, illustrates the intersection of principle, pragmatism, and foresight. He confronted domestic and international challenges with intelligence, integrity, and a commitment to the long-term welfare of the nation. His decisions during crises, his development of executive authority, and his attention to precedent all reflect the continuity of his career, linking early experiences as a lawyer and revolutionary thinker to the responsibilities of the highest office. John Adams's presidency was a defining chapter in the early history of the United States. It demonstrated his capacity to lead under pressure, balance principle with pragmatism, and strengthen the institutions of government. His achievements, challenges, and enduring commitment to civic virtue reflect the cumulative development of a life dedicated to public service, from the fields of Braintree to the halls of power in Philadelphia and Washington. Adams's time as president also highlights the enduring lessons of leadership: courage in difficult decisions, integrity in the face of criticism, and foresight in building institutions that outlast individual office holders. His presidency connects naturally to the broader arc of his life, showing how early influences, revolutionary thinking, legal expertise, and diplomatic experience converged to guide the nation through a critical period of growth and consolidation. After leaving the presidency in 1801, John Adams retreated from the political spotlight, but remained deeply engaged in the life of the young nation. His later years were devoted to reflection, writing, and correspondence with friends, family, and fellow leaders. These years reveal a man who, despite the challenges of public service and the bitter rivalries of politics, maintained his commitment to principle, reason, and civic virtue. Adams returned to his home in Quincy, Massachusetts, seeking the peace of domestic life after decades of public service. The transition from national leadership to private citizen was not easy, but he embraced it with the same discipline and dedication that had defined his career. He continued to read, write, and study, reflecting on the Revolutionary era, the development of the United States, and the lessons of governance. His home became a center for intellectual engagement, where he shared ideas with family and friends and recorded his thoughts on history, politics, and philosophy. One of the most notable aspects of Adams's later life was his extensive correspondence with Thomas Jefferson. Despite years of political rivalry, the two men rekindled a friendship through letters that spanned decades. Their correspondence covered topics ranging from politics and philosophy to religion, history, and personal reflection. These letters offer a unique insight into the minds of two of the founding fathers, revealing their enduring commitment to reasoned debate, mutual respect, and the pursuit of knowledge. The letters also demonstrate Adams's willingness to learn, reconsider positions, and maintain intellectual humility even after a lifetime of achievement. Adams remained active in public discourse, though from a more reflective and advisory position. He wrote essays on government, the Constitution, and the principles that should guide the Republic. He emphasized the importance of civic education, moral integrity, and the responsibilities of citizens. For Adams, the success of a nation depended not only on institutions, but on the character and engagement of the people. His reflections during this period helped shape the understanding of Republican governance for future generations. Family continued to play a central role in Adams's life. He shared a profound partnership with his wife, Abigail Adams, whose counsel had been essential throughout his career. Their letters remain a rich source of insight into both personal and political life, showing a partnership built on mutual respect, shared ideals, and deep affection. Adams also took an active interest in the education and careers of his children, particularly John Quincy Adams, who would later follow in his father's footsteps to become president. Through his family, Adams's legacy extended beyond his own achievements, shaping the values and public service of the next generation. Adams's health and age gradually limited his public activity, but his mind remained sharp. He continued to write extensively, producing memoirs, essays, and historical reflections. These writings offer a remarkable record of the Revolutionary Era, the early Republic, and the philosophical foundations of American government. His meticulous attention to detail, careful reasoning, and moral perspective provide historians with a clear view of his principles and the challenges he faced. The final years of Adams's life were marked by both reflection and a sense of historical perspective. He lived to see the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the enduring success of a nation he had helped to create. In a remarkable coincidence, John Adams died on July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration, on the same day as Thomas Jefferson. Their passing on this symbolic date underscored the enduring impact of their work and the deep historical connections between the Founding Fathers. Adams's legacy extends across multiple dimensions. As a revolutionary thinker, a skilled lawyer, a principled leader, a diplomat, and a president. Each phase of his life demonstrates continuity of character, courage, integrity, commitment to justice, and a focus on the long-term welfare of the nation. His ability to act according to principle, even when politically unpopular, set a standard for public service that resonates to this day. His influence is also evident in the institutions and practices of the United States. Adams advocated for checks and balances, separation of powers, a strong yet accountable executive, and the importance of civic virtue. These principles shaped the early republic and continue to guide American governance. Moreover, Adams's diplomatic work, particularly in Europe, ensured the nation's survival during its most vulnerable years and established a model for principled, strategic engagement with the international community. Adams's writings, especially his letters and essays, remain a vital part of his legacy. They offer insight into the intellectual and moral foundations of the nation and reveal a thoughtful, disciplined, and deeply committed public servant. His reflections on law, governance, and human nature provide guidance for understanding both the historical context of the American Revolution and enduring questions about leadership and citizenship. In assessing Adams's life, it is clear that his contributions were not always celebrated in their time. He faced criticism, political opposition, and personal challenges throughout his career. Yet history has recognized the enduring impact of his work. Adams helped define the principles of independence, guided the creation of the American Republic, strengthened the early federal government, and demonstrated the importance of integrity and principle in public life. John Adams's later life and legacy illustrate the full arc of a remarkable life of service. From a young lawyer in Massachusetts to a revolutionary leader, diplomat, vice president, and president, he consistently acted with reason, courage, and commitment to justice. His writings, actions, and example continue to inspire those who study the founding of the United States, showing that leadership grounded in principle and foresight can leave a lasting imprint on a nation. John Adams's death in 1826 marked the close of a life that had spanned the birth and consolidation of the United States. His influence, however, endures, not only in the structures of government he helped shape, but in the values of public service, principle, and civic responsibility that he embodied throughout his life. Adams's story demonstrates the power of intellect, integrity, and moral courage to transform both a nation and the course of history.